Welcome to Futurum Tech TV. I'm Daniel Newman, your host today for this conversation with Alexis Crowell at Intel. We're going to be talking about AI at the edge. I'm Daniel Newman, your host, like I said, principal analyst and founding partner at Futurum Research. And Alexis, welcome to Futurum Tech TV.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Part of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've taken our analysis to TV, our conversations to video, more personality, getting more face-to-face in a world where you cannot get face-to-face. But I'm excited about this conversation, Alexis, talking about AI at the edge. But before I do that, for everyone out there that's taking the time to spend with us, tell everybody about yourself and what you do at Intel.
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. So for the last 3.5, 4 years, I've focused on AI. I've been on the product marketing and marketing side of telling our AI story and bringing technology to all of the different customer bases, right? Because AI is underpinning what will happen going forward. So I've been really fortunate to be at the forefront of that in both helping customers implement, but also then getting to go tell their stories back into the market. And right now I'm focused purely on IoT and how are we bringing the entire IoT story together, but explicitly AI, given how much AI, especially inference, is going to happen at the edge.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The AI and IoT story, some of partners of yours are using terms like AIoT. In fact, you're seeing that out there right now. But we are really seeing that with the vast data creation, collection, ingestion that's going on, that's putting a lot of strain on resources. That's putting a lot of pressure on companies to try to utilize and maximize. We know the best companies are differentiating themselves by really aggregating all that data and using it in the way they interact with customers, the way they buy products. So that means if the best are doing it, everyone else is going to be required to keep up, and they're going to need the tools and the technologies to do so. And you sort of alluded to it in your introduction, and no question your passion, Alexis, for the technology. It comes through the screen, and you can see it in a smile. You're beaming when you talk about it. But in all seriousness, it's an exciting space. I mean, you literally cannot come across a technology right now, whether it's consumer stuff, the way we watch our movies, and the way we get information, to when we shop online, to the way we basically take data from parking lots and people walking down streets to be able to optimize retailers or optimize the way a government is managing its city. But take a step back. AI at the edge. What is it? Why is AI at the edge? What's the discussion right now that's going on around AI at the edge as opposed to just AI in general?
Sure. So we think about AI as really being a foundational technology, right? So it's not so much about a workload. It's about how do we get more insights, more actionability out of data, right? I mean, we've all heard the stat. In the last 2 years, more data has been created than like the last 200 or whatever it is, right? It's huge. But it's only 2% that's actually been analyzed or acted on. So how do we flip that? And what AI really allows us to do is by moving that algorithm, those insights closer to where the data is created, we can act faster and more readily against what we're seeing. So let's take an example, computer vision, right? Like having a robot or a computer see what's in front of it or what's happening around it is a use case that can be used on factory floors. It can be used in retail. It can be used in restaurants all over the place. But let's say you've got a robot on a factory floor that's, maybe moving a machine from one spot to another. You don't want that computer vision algorithm running in the cloud or running far away that's going to add latency to potentially stop that robot if somebody walks in front of it, right? How do you add that safety feature if you're having to deal with the latency of running it back to the cloud? So not only is it action, right? You can act faster because there's no latency required, but you also then get insights that can be more localized to what you're seeing around you so that you can continue to move your business forward faster.
Yeah, there's a symbiotic partnership that is going to take place between edge and cloud.
Yes.
I mean, there's no way you can do all the compute for every piece of data being created at the edge, but there are certain workloads that unquestionably, you think about autonomous vehicles, for instance, you mentioned computer vision in the post-pandemic or COVID world, where we're going to have an extra amount of focus on hygiene, safety, social distancing. You're seeing a lot more companies looking at, like in retail, like as retailers want to open in certain capacities. Well, how do we manage that? Well, computer vision could essentially look at a space and be like, oh, we have the right amount or too many or not enough people in a space. Or how do we set up the store to make sure people can distance, or a restaurant?
Exactly.
So those are a lot of great applications that require the right compute and the horsepower, and more real time is going to be critical. Whereas,
exactly. Or think about the engagement, right? I mean, the thing with if you take your retail example, if you use all of these autonomous elements to set up your store, you still want that personal touch for the most part, especially certain brands, as you walk in the store when we can, right? So using things like NLP and natural language to help have kind of an interactive, hey, I'm really looking for a new pair of jeans, point me to the right spot, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a human interaction in that moment, but it still feels a little bit more personal to the customer walking in.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I do think it's a combination. I think some of what we're seeing in this kind of what I call the pandemic playbook is going to be incrementally, it's not going to be phased out. I think we're going to learn from these things and continue, but we're going to start to return more towards experience. And like,
I think so.
When people come into a restaurant, it's not just going to be about, are you sitting far enough apart? It's about, how do we really make people happy and deliver the best offer in the right moments, or in the workplace? How do we make meetings better? Not just because we want people to distance, but because why were we doing that thing in the first place? Why were people walking in the room trying to use some very confusing touch panel when they could just walk in and be like, call Alexis, and it would know from conversational that I'm meaning you. And it can take data off my edge device, like my phone, connected to that network locally, to know who the most popular Alexis might be in my phone, or who I'd be most likely to be calling from work. So those are some great examples. I'd love to ask you too, because you guys at Intel, and we work and have advised and worked with the company for a long time, focus a lot on customer and customer, but being really an advisor. So despite the fact that you're a manufacturer, there's a lot of consult going on. And so as you're talking to these customers about kind of implementing AI at the edge, what are you kind of suggesting? Because I think it could be a lot to absorb, whether it's a government, whether it's it's a retailer. I think the options must feel limitless, and it must be creating a little bit of fear in terms of action. And I imagine you're trying to help that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't talked to a company whose board of directors hasn't said, you need an AI strategy. And then the CEO kind of goes into paralysis by analysis, like, oh my gosh, where do I start? So there's a couple of things that we try and help walk people through that eases the concern. First off, don't think about AI as this big, massive, scary thing. One of the best things that you can really think of as a business owner is what's the intersection between scarcity, where you might not have enough resources to go do something, and knowledge, right? So I'll put a really tangible example around that. If you're a rural hospital and you've got an MRI machine and you've got an X-ray machine, but you don't have a radiologist on staff, how can you still help your patient without having a 3 or 4 day turnaround time because you're sending those images off somewhere else? You could put AI at the edge in that instance and help get to a diagnosis faster. Now, you'd still want a radiologist to check it, right? But it gets you started down the path. So if you think about that intersection, right? Scarcity, we don't have a radiologist, but knowledge, because you need a specialty, to really read those images, that's a great place to go start. And if you think about it that way, you kind of take bite-sized chunks, it makes the implementation easier. The other piece that I think is really important is, we're super proud of the fact that Intel and our hardware goes forwards and backwards on compatibility and use cases. And a lot of times you don't actually have to go get new systems and new equipment to test and try something, right? We've worked with a number of companies where we said, hey, do you know your Intel Xeons actually have inference boost capabilities where you could run a lot of what you're trying to do on the hardware you've already implemented, right? So it doesn't have to be a huge cash outlay either in terms of investment to get started. And if you kind of break those pieces down, then you're giving folks, step-by-step tangible ways to go implement that doesn't seem so daunting.
And then you can sort of test concepts too, like you could do it in the cloud, knowing that as you remove, or on your prem in your data center, and that you can remove latency by putting, hardware at the edge for a certain thing, but they can test it on Xeon. They can use their current ERPs or their current big data tools to essentially accelerate using DL Boost. So yeah, that's really interesting. By the way, you made me laugh when you talk about the radiology examples. I've had multiple cases now where my kids who are athletes have broken a bone and we've had it misread one way or the other, where it was misread by the in the emergency room, and then the radiologist called and said, no, it is broken, or vice versa. As AI becomes so much more pervasive, things like that, those mistakes are going to be made less frequently.
Exactly.
They're going to have so much more data to be able to see, like, this is why this got misread. This is how this got misread. It's going to actually give an indicator to that person making that initial read, like, we've seen this before.
Exactly.
But that latency, that differentiation is small, but that also creates a really big difference in patient experience. And when you're a hospital or a hospital system, that experience is the moneymaker. That's the actual measurement piece.
Well, or if you're the concerned parent, right? I mean, either side is changing how you then want to go forward with that healthcare system. And there's a ton of healthcare systems out there. So how are we helping people have better, very scary moments become a little bit more, seem a little bit more empathetic? GE Healthcare is one of our big partners in this space. They've already started that with some of our tech. And, if you start to then pile on tools like OpenVino, or we have a dev cloud. So to your point on, how do you test and know where to then land it? You can do it there. Like, there's all of these great pieces that are in place that we can help walk customers through so that it's much more accessible than it might sound when your board of directors says, hey, go get me an AI strategy.
Yeah, that's amazingly. I feel a lot like it's where big data was 3 or 4 years ago, where it was just do it. And it was like, do what? And it was like, do one thing, do 2 things, do 3. And that's the point, is what are the most important workloads to improve employee safety, customer experience, accessibility, compliance, whatever it is, those couple of things that you can do one, nail it, and then rinse and repeat. And that's kind of what we ran up against in big data. Alexis Crowell, I want to thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me here on Futurum Tech TV. It's a great discussion, everybody. Check out the links below if you're looking at this on YouTube, and we've got some links where you can learn more about what Alexis and I talked about here today on Futurum Tech TV. If you hit us on the Twitters and you're watching this as a piece of a video on Twitter, go ahead and click into the profile and click onto the link, because we'd love for you to see the whole video. But for now, for this episode of Futurum Tech TV, thanks Intel for partnering up on it. Thanks, Alexis. We got to go. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.